Yeah, they're working on it. I'm working, people are working on it.
Okay, I got ours.
Gail, are we ready? All right. Good morning, everyone. We'll call this meeting to order. We have a couple of members that may come in a little bit, but want to thank you all for joining us here. This is a very important meeting because this is the last one where we will be able to discuss the plan before we submit it to the governor. And really, first, let me just say how much I appreciate the work you all have done, the conversations that you have engaged in, and the assistance you have provided to us, being the experts in various aspects of education, stakeholders that are affected by what we're going to be doing, and those who are going to be out there as representative of folks who are on the front lines, either on the receiving end for students or on the end of delivering education for those students. So just want to say as we start out how much I appreciate the effort that y'all have given us and given the state. First, or the next item on the agenda is the minutes from the previous meeting, and I would just ask if there are any questions or corrections or comments on the minutes, and if not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the minutes as written.
All right, thank you. Ms. Flowers, do I have a second? A second from Mr. Bennett, and is there any discussion? All right, seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion is adopted, and the minutes are adopted. Okay, so next item is the feedback from the 30-day comment period. You all have the link that was provided that summarized the feedback we've received, And just wanted to pause to see if you had any reactions or observations on any of the comments, any of the feedback.
Do you have a number of the, or the amount of feedback that we received? Just the quantity?
We do, and
It didn't have to be specific, just, I mean, were you pleased with the amount or?
okay, so when Dr. Pfeffer and I went to CCSSO, we heard other states that gave numbers in the range of 1,500, 2,000 comments. We were considerably less than that, so it would have been nice. I mean, I think the comments we got were very substantial. You know, there was a lot of meat to them, which was helpful. And I don't know if that's a function of maybe other states didn't do as much with the individual teams like we did. It's just hard to make a comparison. We made an effort every time we were at a co-op meeting this summer to say, we need your feedback. And we would see a little bit of an uptick that week. A few more comments would come in. Wasn't as robust in the numbers as I would have liked to have seen. But again, that may be because we engaged so many folks in more small group conversations. I know the EL groups were very active in those conversations, which they may have thought, well, we don't need to submit comments because we're actually talking about it with Tricia Kerr and others. So in those groups, that may be a contributing factor.
So you got a lot of group type feedback, I guess.
We did. We had a lot of group feedback and a lot of those, specialty areas, focused area groups. I know Dr. Arola had a lot of engagement with folks like that, and so that, again, that may be why we didn't see the actual submitted comments at a higher level.
Okay, good.
And I would invite, now, Ms. Smith isn't here. She's out this week, but any of the ADE team that might want to weigh in on that, I certainly invite that. So, Ivy, do you have any insight there?
Commissioner, I think you addressed what I think was probably that we did have so much face-to-face contact with stakeholders, and I think that we received a lot of the verbal feedback and questions, and of course we did encourage them to go and submit that feedback online, but in general we did have a lot of positive feedback over the direction. They felt comfortable with the direction, and I think most people realize too that there are still things that we're working through and knowns, but I think also realizing that we have the revisions to our state accountability system, and knowing that there's congruence with both federal and state has really been a relief as well. So.
All right, any other questions, thoughts, observations? All right, then we'll move on then to item 2 under the action agenda, and review and discussion of the final ESSA plan. Just general comments for me is I can't express how awesome the ADE team has been in these last few days of pulling this together. You all have contributed greatly, but in addition to that, the ADE team, in working to try to pull all that feedback together that we did get, the folks who took the time to review the 5th indicator, folks who took the time to review the weighting of all the indicators, the folks who took the time to review and provide feedback on the various components of the plan, and then now the ADE team bringing all that together and putting it on paper in a way that that flowed well, that was coherent. There were times, maybe a couple of weeks ago, that I thought, oh my goodness, are we going to be able to pull this off? And I think we all, as we were sitting in the conference room pulling all that together, we said, are we going to pull this off? But I think what we have that you all received earlier this week is a very strong document. And it really is reflective of stakeholder engagement. And it's not a plan that was developed in the conference room on the 3rd floor. And we said that early on, that this could not be a plan developed on the 3rd floor in the conference room. And it did need to reflect Arkansas. It needed to reflect all of Arkansas. So my observation generally is this is a strong plan, and we're going to have something that I think we can be proud to submit to the U.S. Department of Education in September. I'm very confident that the governor, who has already read it, he read the draft, and now we're going to submit the final version to him. And I think from his initial feedback, he seems very pleased with it. This is something that the governors do discuss when they are at their national governors meetings. And I know he has a desire for Arkansas not to be overlooked in any way. And I think we've given him something that he can go out and show other governors that, look, this is what we're doing in Arkansas, and we think this is fits us very well and can be a model. So I would open it up. I know you all have sections, Ms. Newton, Mr. Bennett, you all had Section A, and some of our members aren't going to be here to discuss it, but we'll just start with the sections that we had assigned previously and open it up, and we'll start with Mr. Bennett, Ms. Newton.
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. First, I want to agree with the commissioner. It's a really, really strong plan. I read more than Section A just because I thought it was really, really good. The only thing I actually found that wasn't that was kind of a question. I don't know if it was fixed, but on page 12, under theory of action, there's a numbered list of stating the purpose of the plan, and it's numbered twice. I don't know if that was a mistake that was corrected already or not.
I know that we have been reviewing and found some typographical things like that, and we're keeping a running total. So who's recording those for me? I can't see who's out there. Ivy, just make sure we've got somebody that's making note of
Yes,
these.
we'll be making note of that, and I think Ms. Hollis is keeping minutes too, so I'll keep a list and she'll have one as well.
All right, great. Sometimes redundancy is a good thing, so we'll make sure Kalisha and then somebody else is out there catching that. It just to specifically identify someone who has been very good at catching those and helping us correct that, Tiffany Thomas, who's in our legal. She's our FOI ombudsman and coordinator, but this is something she has really been able to dig into and has been a great help. So publicly, I just want to give kudos to Tiffany. If you see Tiffany, I wish we should have brought her down here, and we may, before the end of the meeting, bring her down so you all can give her some proper recognition. So might send a note upstairs, Ivy, if maybe they could bring her down so we can give her a good pat on the back. But we'll make note of that. Mr. Bennett, anything else you observed?
Everything else was great to me.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. All right, Ms. Newton.
Yeah, I just approached what I would talk about a little bit differently was that just trying to look and find what the changes were from the previous draft to this draft. And one of the things that I wanted to really point out, and we'll just go to the page 12 that he just pointed out, is just how much clearer the descriptions are and how much clearer and more specific the plan is now. It's just so much easier to understand to me than it was. And a great example is right there under that theory of action. It gave specific goals of what the plan wanted to do and what Arkansas wants to do to go toward student-focused learning. And over and over and over in the plan, the plan comes back to the idea and the goal of creating student-focused learning for our students here in Arkansas. Some of the big ideas, though, as far as changes, the proficiency goal for the state, we, in the previous plan, had it set at 90% proficient for all student groups, and now I think it was on page 26, if you wanted to look at it, page 26 is changed to 80%, and I think that I know schools and probably teachers, I go back to the teacher viewpoint, teachers are going to feel like, you know, that's doable. I can get there with my kids, and you know, it's going to take work, and so, you know, I'm not sure about what the process was from going from 90 to 80, but you may.
I'll be glad to address that, because there may be some that look at that as, well, you know, we thought 90 was good, and we see this as a step back. We did get a lot of feedback, especially at the co-op meetings, that 90% felt really close to 100%, which was No Child Left Behind. And we came back and we reflected on that. And when we started looking at where we were in the No Child Left Behind, our old standards, benchmark exam, and if you look at our new standards and you look at our new assessment, we've really raised the bar. And so, you know, part of, and I've talked about this a number of times, raising the bar is progress, and you know, sometimes that can't be captured in a percentage necessarily. So that, as we looked at that and we kicked around, you know, maybe some of the other ideas, and statistically, because you have to have statistical to back it up, and when Dr. Arola looked at 80 versus 90, and she looked at the statistical improvements that were made under No Child Left Behind in the early years, and then she weighed it against the increased rigor of our newer standards, our new assessment system, she came back and she said 80 is perfectly reasonable, and it is aspirational for us.
Yeah.
And those are the benchmarks that had to be met. You know, had to be aspirational goals, had to be you know, but at the same time, it had to be reasonable, things that, as you said, educators can look at and say, you know what, we can do that. So that's kind of the conversation that we had internally as we were reviewing the feedback, and what's presented today goes into quite a bit of detail on the statistical justification for that.
Yeah, you know, I totally agree with high expectations, but you know, you have to make it reasonable, and so I was pleased with that. I think that was a good change, and I'm going to wait and let Michelle talk to the EL changes, but there was timelines were given by grade band. There were some changes in that, and so under the English language. The another change that I found was it under the school quality and student success indicators, which is the fifth indicator. There is a whole list, and it might be easier if you look at the page there. I think page 42. Let me see if I can get there. I didn't print it off, so it's taking me a minute to get there.
Is that table 15?
Yeah, it's that big, long table. I was, anyway, that there are more of those indicators to choose from than what we had in the previous plan. And it may be better for somebody from the department to explain it than to me to try to explain it, but it's going to be based on, it's the way I read it, is what the students are eligible for. If they are eligible for, of course, the chronic absence, and that was a change also. We had done before the inverse of chronic absences, I think, and that's changed to actually chronic absence. So I think that'll be easier for people to understand. But the way I read it under this fifth indicator, students will accrue points based on what they would be eligible for. For example, a third grader would be eligible to accrue points in reading at grade level, but not necessarily on-time credits. And so then a school would, it would be based on a percent. Each student gets a percent, and then they get an overall school percent. And probably someone from the department can explain it much better than I can, but that was a change.
Yeah, we did, there was a considerable change in that, and
Yeah.
Dr. Pfeffer or Ms. Smith may want to join the conversation.
And yes, I'll talk a little bit and let the others chime in, because one of the, when we were sharing information about the fifth indicator and going through and really talking with schools, it's still, we did have some limited options for this initial year, and also you have on page 42, the little graphic with the A, B, and C. You know, we were clear from the beginning that there were some data that we were able to use this coming year in the immediate future, because we had the data, and it was data that could be modeled. Some of it was data that we had, but we still had to work on what that modeling would be, and then the next were data systems that we had to build. So that was a very good conversation, but we still, in our conversations and the feedback we got, educators still felt like that these were kind of things out there that maybe they could or could not really control. And we got to really thinking again about our whole approach to student-focused education. And this is where I'm going to let Ms. Smith talk a little more, because she really helped to push us back to an earlier idea we had, where what if we could look at every child? And what if we could develop a fifth indicator where we had those things that we knew were measures of school quality, whether it was providing access to students for those learning opportunities? What are those things that are going to help ensure that our students are achieving, they're growing, they're developing the personal competencies needed? And so we went back and looked at, okay, how could we generate those points for student, and with the intent, and this is where I think we're going to have to constantly guard ourselves. It's not about how many points can we get out of a kid. It cannot be about how many points can we get out of a kid, but it should be about we're able to see if all of our students are able to access these opportunities that we say are good for kids and that will help provide that personalized experience for kids to be successful. So that was the genesis in going back and creating this type of a model. And we think it's going to be really beneficial for schools to be able to go back and see, are all of my students able and accessing all of this, or do we have either certain students or certain groups of students that may be falling below the mark? And the modeling that Dr. Arola has done as we've gone through and made these changes, where all of our required student groups are able to, we have data for all of them. So it definitely is meeting a lot of that criteria that we needed for that fifth indicator.
Let me just add to that too, because of the requirement of the fifth indicator that from ESSA, is that this has to be disaggregated by student group. Ivy's point about it can't be just about how many points can a student get. It really is about what are you delivering for all of your students. And if when we get these data sets in, when we start analyzing, it will be apparent very quickly if you have a segment of your student population that is not being served by AP or IB or concurrent credit. It's going to be very apparent if you've got a segment of your student population that are not earning those community service learning credits. At the lower grades, it's going to be apparent if your kids aren't, if you have a subgroup of students that are not performing on science. You know, those are all indicators that as this discussion grew, we really saw that that this meets that equity challenge that we have. That in Arkansas, we're going to make sure we're meeting the needs of all the students and not just trying to get all your your good students to rack up a bunch of points so that it makes your school look good. So I think this list of school quality and success indicators is going to serve us well, and then we're going to add to it as we get more data and we get more confidence in some of the other indicators that we have. You're going to see this list grow, or maybe some of these be replaced by more robust indicators. So we're always looking to get better. We're always going to look to improve, and that's what we're going to be asking of our schools, is to look for ways that they can get better and improve.
That was something I mentioned a while ago, that I was very impressed by the plan, was how student-focused it is. And this is a highlight of that, how it focuses on the individual student and then moves that into the school. And so when we can focus down what we're doing on individual students, then I think that as a state that we're really making progress. So I was very pleased by that.
This is going to help our districts and our schools with that meaningful stakeholder engagement component that is such a critical piece of ESSA, is that, Ms. Newton, in that context of individual students, those conversations between parents or family members, we think this is going to facilitate deeper conversations about, when we talk about student success plans under Act 930, all of this information is going to feed into the conversations that we want our schools to have about each student, and trying to make sure that their needs are met and they're achieving all they can achieve.
Yeah. And I was glad to see the computer science in there. That was an addition, I think, that our plan needed before, that was missing, and so I was glad to see that.
I'll give you one guess who suggested that we...
I don't know where that would have
put
come
in there.
from, but anyway, I was glad to see it put in there. So
The governor was very happy to see it included as well.
I bet. Did you want Ms. Smith to comment?
Yeah, I think she would have some good insight in this, too.
One thing that I really felt like this piece did is it brought in all the other factors. So when you think about student engagement and the attendance piece, before we just kept talking about that attendance and kids who were chronically absent missed more than 10% of their days. The way that it's in here, we start talking about, schools can start talking about what's the culture of our building. What's the climate like in our building? And when we went out and listened to the public, we heard people say, our school climate, and people want to be involved and people want to be engaged. And so the conversation here turns to, what is the culture of our school? And do kids want to be here? Do parents and families want to be here? It also changes the conversation about, looking at who is missing. Do we have a healthy environment? Is this the place where we need to start looking at bringing in coordinated school health services or clinics, or some of those health issues out there that we have in certain areas of our state? So it makes the conversation bigger than just about those kids who miss more than 10%. The community service piece, that's another thing we heard. And that's also part of our vision here at the department, is that our students, our community, that engagement piece there, and that they're involved there. We had a law within the state of Arkansas, Act 648, that passed in 1993, that allows credit for students who have 75 hours of volunteer time. And so that's something that we need to dust off. We need to make sure that that information is out there, and that's something that we all want. We want kids who are actively engaged in their communities. And we have a process in place right now, and that's something that can grow. And that's something else that we heard from stakeholders when we went out there, about what they were doing with their communities and their families already. The conversations around career pathways. Within the concurrent credit piece, you also see ACE concurrent credit, so that's those technical vocational classes that students can get involved in early. Future conversation for that is continuing to look at those industry recognized certificates, and so that's where we're heading with those B's and C's for future. But I'm really proud of the department work on this, and when we talk about student focused, if we can get everything that's on here, I feel like if we had folks working in a positive, proactive manner to get points, these are positive things that are happening in our buildings and our schools for kids. So,
Absolutely. Good job.
Just a brief word on Ms. Smith. This was, I think, something she had in her head for quite a while, and trying to get she was trying to get me to understand what she was talking about, and I was having trouble seeing it. And then after, we got all the feedback, and we sat down, we put it all together, and we started putting it on paper. It really started coming together of what this could be. So I think I probably frustrated her a few times a couple of months ago when I wasn't getting it. Well, now I get it, and I think what's reflected here in the fifth indicator is a really strong set of, this is what we want for all of our kids. I mean, it really is. So, and then, we get into the weighting of how, we had to be careful that we couldn't weight a fifth indicator, that it would overcompensate for growth and achievement. But what we did is use components of fifth indicators that would drive growth and achievement. They couldn't, we didn't want it to be a standalone thing just as a bonus points, whatever. We wanted these to be something that would feed into positive outcomes on those achievement and those growth components of the essay indicators.
If they're getting on-time credits, then your scores are going to go up. All of those things that are there are great choices. And so while you're talking about weighting, on page 45, the weighting did change just a little bit. Achievement went to 35 in high school, 9-12. Achievement went to 35, and growth went to 35. And then this fifth indicator went to 15. So there was a little bit of change in the weighting there. And then while we're talking about the weighting, I don't know if people remember from the previous plan, we wanted feedback on the two options on how to incorporate EL progress toward proficiency. And the second plan was the one that is being used in this. And what it is it's incorporated into the school growth based on the proportion of EL students that a school has. And so, again, someone from the department might explain it better, but that was that second option. If someone wants to
Somebody want
comment.
to tackle that, the EL? Dr. Arola is not available, and she could really the person who could explain this better than I can, and Stacy can explain it better than I can too, so I'm going to let her take a stab
I'll
at
let
it.
you chime in too. Okay, so the conversation about how do we look at our English learners throughout the state and really account for the growth that they've made towards English language proficiency. And also take into account the size of the student population for English learners within a district. In some districts, we have very large concentrated populations of EL learners, and in other areas, we have very small populations. And so we wanted it to be equitable as far as looking at that growth and how it was calculated in. And so, English learners proficiency is one of the required components within the ESSA plan. And so it really fit, and this was a huge conversation that went on with the EL advisory group about how do we do this. And we put out several different options. One option was to take English language arts content area, math content area, and English language proficiency, the three different areas, add them together for a final score. The option that was chosen was for the growth portion for students to take their English language arts growth with their math growth, come up with a score, and then take the students in the building that were EL learners and calculate their growth towards English language proficiency and blend those numbers into the total growth score of content growth. So you will have EL learners over here in the content area who are getting growth calculations, and then they're added again based on growth calculation towards English language proficiency. So you're using two different assessments. You have ACT Aspire over here for the content area, and then on this side you have ELPA 21, which is a different assessment measuring towards English language proficiencies. And so those growth scores are being combined and calculated in that section. How do you like my visuals there? Do you want to clarify anything that I said, or?
I think that's great, and actually, I'll just add on to it a little bit and talk a little bit about the timeline to proficiency, because I think that's a factor in how they came up with that. But of course, when you're talking about language acquisition and time to proficiency, it's a very there's a lot of variables to it. And so one of the good things that the group discussed was there's other factors. Let's not say it's going to take exactly 7 years to become proficient, because what grade level did they come in at? What proficiency level did they come in at? And so that area in the plan gives a really good graph. It's kind of graphed out and modeled. And they did take some, of course it'll be updated when we get more of the ELPA 21 data, but they're utilizing with some proxies the ELDA scores that we had for the past, like about, I think, around 8 years. Using those, it's broken up into grade bands, and so a K2 might take up to 5 years. 3-5 might take 6, so on and so forth. And so it breaks that up a little bit, and specifically by proficiency level when they came in and grade level when they came in. So, love that.
Yeah, it was very good.
Yeah.
Good job. There were other changes in there. The other,
Let me go back to the weighting really quickly, so that you kind of know where what drove some of that conversation. We did get some feedback, and I thought it was very it was worth taking note of that. And this was from an out-of-state group, but they had suggested even a different. Even less focus on growth than the 35%. But, originally we had growth, I believe, at 45. And the point that this group made, which was valid, was that at the high school level, you want to value growth, but at that point you really need to be hitting those achievement marks, because that then is on-time credits, and, all that factors in. So when we looked at how we were addressing that, we felt like a minor change, not too heavily on the achievement side, but maybe a little less on the growth, and so that that focus on achievement would still be there at the 9-12 grade band.
Okay. That makes sense, because they're getting ready to go out, and you want them to be proficient or as close to it as you can get. So, yes. Only other, there are other changes in there. One of the other things that I noticed in the plan that I had thought was missing before was a discussion of pre-K, and that's been added in there, and I thought that was a positive thing. And there are other changes as far as some things that have been made, but I think those are the major things that we would need to discuss today.
Okay. All right. Good. Questions or thoughts, comments from any of the other members? All right, any other remarks, comments, observations from the ADE team? All right. Okay, so B and C, did Ms. Flowers, you have any thoughts that you want to share on those sections? So.
First, compliments to the Department of Ed team who's done so much work with this program. No major concerns. I was impressed with the fact that those programs and agencies that were first abbreviated are now spelled out and clarified, which was very good. All of the charts clearly understood, no major corrections. Maybe the minor 1 or 2 typos. I've emailed Tina Smith about those,
good.
and she's taking care of those.
And since you brought up Tina, she evidently is watching us from somewhere on the beach, I guess. And she said that there were 114 responses.
Okay.
So I think, I'm not sure if that's written responses. I think we had more survey feedback. I'm not sure what those numbers are, but if she's hearing me ask that question, she'll probably know and send that to me. But to your question initially. Okay. Moving then on to, all right, Senator English and Ms. Phillips, we'll talk about Section D. just if anyone has any thoughts that they, Mr. Bennett, you said you read other components. Did you have anything you wanted to share with the group on anything?
No, sir.
Outside? Okay, all right, that's fine. Representative Cozart, Ms. Bratton?
Okay. I'm going to start with obviously section E. I as well. I'm really impressed. It just I was lucky enough to be a part of some of those advisory meetings and kind of listened and put in some input to the work that they've done, and it looks excellent. I mean, the changes are not, as far as the content, it hasn't changed from the last draft that went out, not much, but they did specify some things almost to the point of instructions. This is what we're going to do. And I really like that because it's that specificity that we, you know, if there's any confusion, this is exactly what you're doing. But that's good. And then I don't think there was any major issues going in. I think I made a comment last meeting about the parent notifications being really specific, and I kind of, you know, wondered about that. I did reread that section, and I understand the idea behind it, you know, and requiring those things, obviously. But as far as that section, there's not really any issues that I can see. Moving on to section F and G, I didn't see any major changes in those sections or anything concerns.
More general question, Representative Cozart. I know you all had provided copies of previous draft to the members of, any feedback that you received from members of the General Assembly?
We didn't receive, you know, we talked about it in our last meeting a little bit and provided copies to everyone and told them to take them home and look over them. And of course, then you had a revision come out, and I haven't had time. I've been on vacation, so to look at the revision, but it does look good from a person that knows very little about education. I think I'm just going to say again, y'all have done a great job, and I'm sorry I've missed a lot of the meetings and couldn't be part of this, but I'm amazed at what's come out of this. It looks great. The parts as I've read, I'm just really impressed with, and I think it's going to be a great plan.
And you were a school board member for a while, right?
10 years.
10 years. Just kind of the observation as a local school board member, do you think that what's in here is, because, you know, the audience for these plans are really for reviewers, and that's a conversation we had, you know, a lot, that, you know, who is our audience, and we wanted it to be as reader friendly as possible, at the same time knowing that there was a certain level of statistical and other content that needed to be in there to meet the needs of the reviewers. Is your opinion on whether this is something that local boards, local administrators can understand, the segments such as the fifth indicator, things that could help drive conversations at the local level?
I believe so. If they've been on a school board or been around any kind of schools for any time at all, I mean, even after a year, you'll start learning some of those things. But I think it's very, very friendly. I mean, if I can read it and kind of understand it, I don't understand all the acronyms, and I have to look them up every once in a while to know what it actually says. But, you know, once you get past that, it's very reader friendly, and it will be easy to follow and to improve on, and I think it's going to be great.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Any other comments? EMA, Dr. Jeffcoat couldn't be with us today. Any observations on HI and the appendix? The appendix is always the challenge, because that's where you really get into the technical stuff that Dr. Arola thrives in that world. So, but I'll just make sure we don't miss anything that, based on your review of any of the other sections, that any thoughts that y'all might want to share. Or again, back to the ADE team. Ms. Kaufman, you're hiding from me. I can't see you, but I know you're there. That you all might want to discuss for the group on the conversations we had and surrounding some of the amendments, some of the changes that we've made.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Certainly in our changes, I think we've tried to be, as you have described, we've tried to be as explicit as we can be, at the same time giving ourselves an opportunity to begin to see what implementation will look like in this plan. I think what I'm really interested in today is hearing from our educators who are going to be out putting this into action. And does the plan articulate the things that you need to know to be confident in our accountability system? And to me, as the new person in charge of accountability, I feel I just feel a real need to make sure that our accountability system is transparent, that if you're going to be held accountable to something, you know what it is up front. And so we've tried to be very articulate in this plan so that our educators, as well as our stakeholders across the state, our parents and community leaders, all know how we are going to hold public school districts accountable. And so that would be my question back to you is, have we been transparent so that you know what you're being held accountable to?
I'll speak specifically to English, as far as the English language learner section. I think so. It's really, the plan has become something that, and I know I've spent a little bit more time, and then coming from a district who has a decent amount of language learners and new speakers and things like that, I really believe it's functional. Like it's something that we can strive for. It doesn't keep us stagnant in where we're at, but allows us to grow and our students to grow. And I think it really lays that out well on what that will look like. And as far as vision, when you're reading it, can I see this happening in my district? Yes, over time, definitely. And I think that's going to be the biggest hurdle, of course, is how is it going to be rolled out? Because I think that there will be some districts that are not in a position at this moment to transition quickly. So
the two words that I've heard today that makes me feel confident is transparency, which I believe it definitely is, and attainable and reasonable. So being able to go back to our districts and talk about this, I feel confident that our schools in our state will be able to understand it and will press on. Very good work.
Just a follow-up on that, to those of you that lived through the No Child Left Behind, the original needs improvement process, and then the flexibility waivers, maybe compare and contrast what you experienced there with what you see as the potential in this. Any thoughts on that? Better, and if it's better, how is it better? I mean, because those are the observations that are going to help us in determining how we provide support to our districts.
I know that people are going to appreciate the multiple measures of success. And the other thing that I think about when I think of No Child Left Behind, I just think about that 100% looming over everyone's head, and the noose just kept getting tighter almost every year. Mm-hmm. And so while we know that we're going to continue to push and we will want to strive for the 100%, just knowing that there's, again, reasonable is what I see.
Okay, thank you.
So there were 3 things that we tried to accomplish in this document that I want to get your feedback on. One was a very clear theory of action. And because in this plan, we're modeling what we hope to hear back from all of our districts. Do you have a theory of action? So I'm seeing your head nods of yes, that was clear.
That was one of the things that I had put in my notes that was much clearer than before. It was specific, and I know exactly what the goals of this plan are as far as the theory of action. So that was much better. That was one of the things I keyed in on.
The second part is that improvement is a continuous cycle of inquiry. What do we know? What do we need to know about ourselves? How do we examine our data to develop our action plans? How do we put that plan into action? It's not just enough to have a plan, but you've got to actually put that plan into action. There's got to be implementation. And then there's always that review process of how well are we doing? How did the allocation of our resources cause us to bring about a change, a positive change? And so did you see that continuous cycle of inquiry throughout the plan, not just in the graphics, but in the wording throughout the plan? Was that evident to you?
Absolutely. And again, you're reading my notes. You read them before I started. I know you did. But anyway, I have that.
Teachers, we think alike.
I know. But anyway, it's one of the things that I've got pointed out here in my notes, that it was described more completely. The emphasis is on the district level and trying to make the district look at itself as a whole, so we can start looking at, because we've talked about this over and over, the feeder patterns, and start looking at what is the root cause of what's going on. And so when we improve, and it's not just those districts that are in that bottom 5%, every district in the state has a place that we can improve, and this cycle of is going to get there. And then it doesn't stop there. How is the department, and how are we going to support that cycle of inquiry, and then how can we support that change that might need to happen? So it's all there, and so I was very pleased with that.
So my third point is, Weta alluded to this, is there's a change in this document from our previous work. In our previous work, we talked a lot about schools. And while we're still very focused on having amazing schools in our state, this works from the district level. And so the district is responsible for providing the support to the schools. And even in the identification of support, if you noticed in the language, it says schools in need of support. It never gives a negative label to any school. So a school in need of comprehensive support, additional targeted support, or targeted support, it's a school in need of, and therefore the district is the responsible party for ensuring that those schools receive that support, and as an agency, we're here to provide assistance to those districts. Was that thorough throughout and evident throughout the plan? Yes, head nods. Okay. And my last one was we were adamant about making sure that services were equitable. And did you see equity throughout the plan? Any comments? Let me rephrase. Where did you see equity in the plan?
Ms. Kaufman, I'm going to just tell you that I haven't had as much time to go through it as what I would like, and I don't know that I ever went through with that focus, and that's something that I need to go back and try to look for to make sure that it's there. Just thinking about it, I'm thinking that especially when we're looking at going down to the individual students, that would be the way that we're making sure that we're having equity. But again, I think that's for me, because I only got the plan Monday and I've had grandkids all week, so I need to read it again with that focus. So
that would be great. That lens is really important to us.
Yeah.
that we're providing equitable services to students, to teachers, to schools, to districts. And so, as you look through there, that's a critical component of our
Yes.
work. Thank you.
And that's, when you think about some very important components of this, one being the in size, so now it's going to be 15. If that's approved, there will be a greater percentage of schools now with student groups that will be accounted for than what we had previously. That in and of itself, I think, is a big shift for us in equity. Now, we did get some feedback, frankly, on both sides. We had folks who, if you read the comments, you saw folks saying, well, that's too low. It needs to be higher. Well, because I think a lot of those folks were thinking of it in terms of, No Child Left Behind, that because of those in sizes, you ended up on some list. So I understand that. And then you had the other side who said, no, it needs to be lower. 15 is not low enough. It needs to be 10. I mean, the lowest possible number. And so we tried to hit that right balance. But really, when we looked at it, it was identifying that the greatest percentage of schools so that we could get the greatest percentage of students in those subgroups covered. And a lot of these are, we talk about the capital A accountability versus the small a accountability. A lot of these conversations that need to be driven at the local level, you're not going to be able to have those conversations if your in size is too high, because you're going to lose the ability to see where those kids are. And so it's less about punishing a school than it is driving conversations so that if you don't have the information, you can inquire as to how to get better. So the cycle of inquiry gets hindered. So when you get feedback from folks to say, what were they thinking on the in size of 15, we'll need your help to explain how it's different and why it's important to get it down to that level.
That question that she asked is making me think about it. One of the big focuses, I think, in the school improvement section was on gap closure. Well, that's driving equity. There is to try to close those gaps in the different subgroups. So that's another place besides the in size that as I'm thinking about it, that you're going to see equity in there.
Okay. All right. So any final thoughts, comments? So let's talk about timeline and next steps and timeline. I mentioned to you that this will go to the governor next week. So there is still time that we can take care of any of those topographical, or if you observe some things that need clarification, we do have time to make those types of adjustments. Obviously, when the governor goes through his review process, there may be some other things that he brings up that we will want to go in and make some changes there too. So would encourage you all to continue reading and digging in to see that we've covered everything that you feel like we need to cover. We've addressed all of the issues that may be left unresolved. And then the future of this group. I think this has been very valuable to us as an agency. I hope you have seen value in it. And you've been doing this for, how long have we been going? A year?
August.
Almost a year now, okay. We want this type of conversation to continue, and I'm not asking all of you to commit to whether you want to stay on this group, but I do want to, as I had explained earlier, we want to have a group like this to give us continued feedback on implementation. Because in a few years, we're going to be back to a point of resubmitting. As you see, we have built into the plan, knowing that there are some changes we are looking to make as our data collection and some of these measures are more are better refined and defined. So I just want to hear your thoughts on what you think we might do with a group like this, if you want to continue serving on it, if you think it should be bigger, smaller, frequency of meetings, maybe as we get into implementation, there might be a quarterly opportunity to come together. You all are going to be hearing feedback that we may or may not hear, so I think it's important that you have the opportunity to tell us that, which doesn't have to be a formal meeting, but the conversation that can be generated there I think is always helpful too. So thoughts on how we move forward?
Just one comment. I think learning from past mistakes on initiatives that we may have tried to do sometimes or another in our state, implementation is a big deal, and it can fall apart if you don't keep informed of what's going on. And so I would think feedback through the implementation phase would be vital.
Okay, all right. Do you see value in this group or a group like this coming together on a periodic basis and having the conversations about that implementation? Let's see some head nods. Yeah, Ms. Bratton.
I agree with Ms. Newton. Implementation and having a group similar to this, or even, with more specific to, specific districts or whatever, would be very beneficial to get that feedback in.
Okay. Right. Agree, Mr. Chairman? Okay.
Communication is always good, and feedback. So.
Microphone.
Like I said, communication and feedback is always good. So, how often do you have to update this plan?
Ms. Kaufman, is it 3 years or 4 years?
I believe at the end of 3 years, we have
3.
to resubmit,
Okay.
or that's what we've been told right now.
Well, it's
Yeah, certainly the guidance is still in a state of transition because, there are no rules. There are no federal rules on this. So there are a lot of things that we are still kind of wondering what this future is going to be for us. But I think that's the 3 is what we've been looking at.
But even within that 3-year timeline, if there are needed changes, we do have an opportunity to submit amendments to the plan. So those are point in times when we would certainly need feedback in addition to our ongoing feedback.
So also in the discussion of timelines, September 18th will be the date that we submit. And then the department has 120 days, the U.S. Department has 120 days to make a decision. And we expect, if it follows as past practice has, that there will be some give and take. A number of states are receiving feedback on their plans that were submitted in March. It's been very helpful because we've been able to learn from that, to see where they have been asked for additional information or where they've been told, no, we don't think this meets the law. So we've tried to incorporate what we've learned from those other states into our plan. So we will keep you updated on that too, because we'll get an initial review. They'll go through the peer review process, which will be more extensive, and then at some point in time, a final determination will be made of whether they've approved it or whether we have to submit more. So we'll keep you posted on that. In the meantime, if you all would please let Ms. Hollis know if you're interested in continuing serving in this capacity. And then we will kind of look to see, as I know a lot of folks, there have been job changes, pretty significant job changes for some of us. And we want to make sure that we honor your time and use it wisely. So if you are interested in continuing with us, please let Ms. Hollis know. If you think that it's time to transition out, that's fine too. Let Ms. Hollis know that as well. But we will kind of look to see what a future committee like this could be structure and schedule of meetings, especially for that implementation phase. All right. Any thoughts from the ADE team on that? Does that reflect what we've discussed? Okay. Comments from any of the members?
I just want to take a second. I don't know if I personally thank Ms. Smith, Tina Smith, for her hard work and coordinating all the work in the department. They have all put together an excellent plan, and I know it's the result of many, many late nights and long hours and working weekends, and I just want to tell them how much we appreciate them and all that they do.
Well, and thank you for bringing up Ms. Smith. She joined us a little over a year ago, and this was her task. You know, she's Director of Special Projects, and as I said many times, there was nothing more special than our ESSA plan. It's one of the top priorities, and she has done a tremendous job of putting this all together, and is doing some other exciting things now that you're going to hear more about in the realm of PLCs. So I'm sure you'll be interested in some of that work, but it is going to be good. So just thank you for pointing that out, and I would add my expression of thanks to Tina for all the work that she's been doing on this. Anything I haven't covered? Ivy, Deb?
I don't think so, but Tiffany Thomas is out this morning,
Yes.
so she's not able to visit with you. But we do want to say that these last few weeks with her putting all of this together has really been helpful as well. So we're very grateful to her too.
All right. Well, if there's not anything else to come before the committee, or no further comments or thoughts, observations, thank you. Thank you very much. Can't express that enough. And we're adjourned.